Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned you wish you had the old notes or documents from Kunark.
I
Um,
saw some pictures online of somebody who had printed some of them, but I don't know where they came from.
Interesting.
But yeah, I wish I had my handwritten notes. It was a stack of notes, as I'll explain on your stream, that hung out in a drawer for like a year uh, because Bill Trost had asked me to write up something for Kunark. So I wrote everything up, and it went in a drawer. That wasn't a launch continent. And then with the success of EverQuest, suddenly we were like, hey, we need more content. So Kunark was floored out and had all the major players detailed. So we rolled with it.
Right on. This will be another one of the I might as well just throw this out here now since people are going to be watching this video. Usually I clip them starting at the hey, so who are you and give us your background and all that, and I just go from there. I trim down the VOD for later or whatever. But I've got the feeling with this one, every little detail will be exciting to folks. So I'll just probably start it from where we were about 5 minutes ago. It'll be
Sure.
make for a slightly weird intro, but people get over it. Um, yeah, it's funny because I'm almost afraid to bring up a topic because even what you just mentioned just now, I know people are gonna sink their teeth into that, right? They're like, "Holy shit!" Okay, so you're telling me you wrote this up beforehand? It sat in a drawer. Our
Yeah.
our most beloved
For a
expansion
year.
sat in a drawer for a year. What?
Mm. Yeah. And what people don't know is all of that material that I came up with was from various role playing campaigns that I had run, uh, in my youth, probably in high school or something. So I had it sort of an amalgamation of different campaign worlds from different systems that I ran because I wasn't just running D&D. I was running Rollmaster and uh, GURPS and other systems.
Right on.
And the I think the most important thing that I wanted to do with that continent was to provide a level of darkness or a little bit more of a serious tone than sort of EverQuest had uh, currently, right? It
Right.
was it was a lighter, more heroic sort of offering. I wanted to give players a chance to play another evil race, and also to have this fallen empire and ancient runes and ancient magic and necromancy. I felt like that all coming together with some nice uh, sort of evil masterminds like Venril sat there
Mm-hmm.
would give us a good basis for making really great content. So that was sort of my approach. And after writing it, it just sat in a drawer for a year or so, and then it got pulled out, and then we started using it in earnest. I had written maybe a 5,000 year history or something of the continent, and then detailed the major players or actors and sort of their relationship with each other, and then the major interesting POIs or places of interest, so sites
Mm-hmm.
that could be explored like Cebulus or any of the other the Over There, etc.
Right.
And after writing all that up and sort of what the plots and subplots were and who didn't like who and who liked who and who was going to betray who, uh, then all of that was design took it and ran with it, and then
Right.
they filled in all the missing spots so that I didn't address any of the micro details, stuff they didn't like, they altered.
Right. Right. That's so crazy. Yeah, not to fanboy too much, but as you're describing it, it's like goosebumps. We already so Maniac 25, thanks for the follow. And yeah, I don't know. Do you have Twitch open at the moment? I just realized that that's actually helpful. So if you have the ability to throw this Twitch stream on a screen, you'll be able to see the questions as they come up. That way I don't have to like pick all
Okay.
of them for you. It may be a little bit easier. But yeah, so
You got a
Maniac
link
said,
for me then?
yeah, I'll get it to you. Um, move this over here.
Let's see if the programmer can figure out Twitch.
Yeah.
Probably not. Hey, there's a Twix commercial. That's pretty great.
Yeah. Enjoy a commercial on the way in.
Can I not see the streaming chat until that ends?
Nah, you'll have to once you're in, then you'll be able to see the chat. Let me see.
Okay, I see my fat head up in the corner. That's a good sign.
What was that?
Let's see. It says, like Iguk, I love the many layers of Ceballos. That was just a really well designed dungeon. I enjoyed it thoroughly. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's one of the most common responses when we talk about like what was your favorite expansion, what are your favorite zones, all of that in here. It's just Kunark, Kunark, Kunark. I mean, for me it was a mind blower because I, before I joined Sony, basically I was somebody that like I had a skateboard park in Alabama that I opened when I got out of the army, and like somebody recommended the game. I started playing EQ immediately. Was like I've got to drop everything and move to California and be a part of like this company. I don't care what it takes, and so that had already happened. Like I'd already like had my mind blown before Kunark, and then when Kunark came out, I think it was during that transition period. And it's like, holy shit, there's a whole nother continent, and then the themes and everything else were just so good. It was just such a badass expansion that, yeah, it's it's easy for a lot of us to have it as our favorite. Zima said, "Did you work closely with the artists who implemented the zones, or was that handled by other folk?"
So I would say that that portion was handled by other folk. Um, I just drew out on the maps where sort of everything was going to be and details on sort of what it was. Um, so I would put Ceballos on the map and then talked about what it was, and then design came up with sort of um, the block out of what they wanted, and then they would go to art, and art would just implement it. And they were awesome. They came up with a great tile set, great texturing set for Kunark, for that ancient, jungle rune sort of feel.
Yeah. No, the way it came together was just, I mean, near perfect. Um, the so I tell you what, let's and I know some folks that were actually like they've been asking me all week leading up to this, like, okay, what time's it going to be? And I even put down like 10 o'clock, right? So a few people are going to yell at me later for being 30 minutes early. But before we go too much further, I might as well just have you do the quick intro on who you are. Those folks already know who you are, and they'll be in here eventually asking questions as well. But I guess if we just do the official sort of kickoff and then let it ride from there, then we're just a little bit early.
Yeah, I'm Kevin McPherson. I've been in the video game industry since 1996. Um, EverQuest was the second video game that I worked on. The first one was a rallycross game uh, for PlayStation One. I had heard about EverQuest because um, we had some new employees, Brad McQuaid and Steve Clover, who were big into Magic, and they were playing Magic: The Gathering with John Smedley, and got me into it. So I and other employees would play Magic at lunchtime, and he started talking about this project that he was going to do that was going to be essentially a perma online um, almost like a Dungeons and Dragons simulator. Um, and I immediately thought, well, this is going to make an ass ton of money, so I need to be on this project. And I'm a huge role playing game person, especially on the game master side. So I still run campaigns today, and so this project appealed to me greatly over continuing on with PlayStation. So I asked for a transfer over to that project, and luckily got onto it. And so maybe fourth, fifth person on it. And I would say the first year of it before I got on was R&D, and then the remaining 2 years were pretty hardcore. A lot of crunching, a lot of hard work. And after it shipped, Bill Trost gave me a map and said, "Hey, we don't have anything for this Kunark continent. Do you want to write it up? I know you're into this kind of stuff." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I'll write it up." So I had written up. I wish I still had the pages of notes, but a big stack of notes, 5,000 year history of it, and all the major players, the places of interest, and it ended up sitting in a drawer for a year because um, we were very busy with the live launch, and then it occurred to us, wow, this is incredibly successful, and we're going to need more content, and that's where Kunark was pulled out of the drawer then and implemented into the actual expansion. And I would say if I look back on maybe one thing that wasn't great with it, well, two things. There's some red mobs around there, red names that didn't have loot tables, and that really sucks when you're running around and you kill something and it just doesn't have a drop. And the other thing was the item inflation was pretty extreme over the first game. We could have done a little bit better job about scaling that, but it was fun to get OP items
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, when we've talked to people in the past, one of the things that's come up in that regard too was just that um, that sense of, okay, well, this thing will be out for a year, this thing will be out for 2 years, and then there will be a new game, or
Right.
and so because we had that item inflation happen with Kunark and then with Velius, for sure. And then basically I was coming onto the team in a more official capacity around Luckland,
Yeah.
and that's when I became sort of full time apprentice, and then was actually just doing it. That was my day job, and so then we had a similar challenge there with regards to like the continued inflation. And then by the time we were working on Planes of Power, I know our systems designers and our design director Rich and others, it was just like, okay, we've already capped out like all over the place. We've got to basically rewrite some of these systems and
That's right.
start to address it. So um but yeah, all right,
So much of that engine and things around it have been re-authored over the years. So I went
yeah.
back to work on EQ1, I think in 2013, 2014, somewhere in there, for an expansion or two. Um, some of the code's still the same, but a bunch of stuff has just been re-authored.
Speaking of which, we have a question in chat from Nick that said, "What went behind the decision to use the Tannerus engine for EverQuest? Looking back, was it a good choice? What challenges were there?"
But looking back, it was a great choice because we wouldn't be here talking about it today if it wasn't 20 years later. So it was a fantastic choice. So the Tannerus engine really was called the True 3D engine back in the day, and it was from a third party, and it was a polygonal 3D rendering engine that we used for Tannerus, and that one of the programmers I worked with, Sean Baird, heavily modified and added a really nice sky to. And it just seemed like if you had an operational 3D rendering uh, game, it would be your basis for trying to make the next 3D rendering game. Nobody really had a three. There was no Unreal back then, and there was no
Right.
almost there was Unreal, but not quite, and there was no Unity or anything like that. So we started from there, and it turned out to be a great choice. They spent the first maybe 9 months to a year in R&D, I remember white blocked like a temple slash dungeon, and you go down a stair, real basic UI, and there was like a troll that you would fight, and that all worked, and you could see other players fighting the troll in 3D. So the big agonizing decision for us that we had meetings about was, would we require 3D hardware for this game, because that's a huge risk. Like the market
Right.
didn't, nobody had it, but we said, the game's going to run faster and look prettier if we do it, so we're just going to bite the bullet. And so we're glad we made that decision. It turned out to be good because the fans purchased 3D hardware and played the game.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. For some reason, like I just remember not being very experienced with PC hardware, but doing everything I could to learn exactly what I need to do to ensure that the game looked as good as possible and I had connection stability. Like the moment I started playing, I was like, I've got to be able to stay logged in and have this thing running.
Yeah, that's right.
So
And stability was job one for us. So I don't know if you guys played at launch, but we essentially, our launch protocols were very primitive, and the way that we updated was just immediately. So we would literally yell at each other across offices, "Hey, server's coming down," and then we'd post up a fix and then spool them back up again. So it was at first it was a very manual process, and then over time we got much better about that. That we would, promote things to a quality assurance branch, have it fully tested and vetted before it went up. Because sometimes we put some lemons, you throw grenades over the wall without testing, and sometimes they blow up.
yeah. So I will say in my experience when I was just coming in as an apprentice during Luckland, there was still some of that grenade throwing going on,
Hmm.
but it made for good fun.
Yeah, we had at one point we had a version go up where there was test code in there that caused all like low level creatures. I think it was in the game, uh, but it certainly was in the dwarf starting area where skunks were charming players, and the charm players would then go PvP flag on. They become NPCs and they would kill other real players. So that was pretty funny. We had all these reports coming in. They're like, "Why my friend's killing me? He can't stop." Like, what? That doesn't make sense. Why? But yeah, we had put we were testing charm, and we put it on like skunk spray or something. So skunks were charming players to kill other players.
I can picture how that went. Yeah, let's just toss it on here. It's not going to make it off task, so we can do this real quick. We already have the spell ready to go.
We had one issue where we had no frame rate, and we couldn't. No one could figure out why it was, and it was in that dungeon in Kinos Hills, the Knoll dungeon,
Black
Black
Burrow,
Burrow,
yeah.
and for some reason, no matter what we did, it was no frame rate. And then we figured out, somebody zoomed way out, and it turns out there was a fish that was misscaled, that was larger than the zone map. So everything was inside the fish. So no matter where you were rendering this giant fish, and that was killing the visibility checks and the frame rate. So
That's
funny things happen
amazing.
in game development that you can't really predict.
Yeah, ran into that again years later, and what it was we found two different things because every time you came into the zone, it just frame rate died. One was a doorknob, and the other one was the underside of a couch cushion.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. That was the conversation that went on for a while. I think the producer had that question for a bit. I think that was Jeff at the time.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a concave convex problem with that back then, right? So if you had shapes that weren't correct, then the rendering engine would take a dive, or if you decided to assign some insane texture to it, could be
Yeah.
corrupt for text data. Who knows?
So I'm gonna. This is like I was saying when we were first starting. This is my first one where I don't really have like the game in the background. I've just got this gray desktop, and I don't think it's doing you justice. I will. I'll just take this little browser window up. You probably see it, or we'll see it in a
Right on.
second.
Yeah, I
Um,
see.
then we have the opportunity to throw some stuff up in the background as we do this. But
I
yeah,
do
I
like
mean,
those old school like cloth maps that we used to kick
yeah.
out. I thought that was pretty dope.
Even today, I think it's one of those things because it comes up a lot when we're talking about it in the stream. And
Right.
it's like, it's totally worth it. Even if it's all digital download at this point, I still want, if I love a game, I want to be able to buy this stuff.
So when you were there, Sean, did you see some of those original paintings by Keith
Yeah.
when you were in the office? Those, I mean, when you see pictures of these people, doesn't do them justice. When you see these oils like up close, it's nuts how detailed they are. There it
It's,
is. There's the map.
yeah, let me see if we can make this a little bit bigger.
So this is cool. My son found this at Book Off in San Diego. It was in the package, but it's one of the little EverQuest. I don't know what you
Oh,
call this
nice.
figurines, and this is like the Venerable Satyr Shaman. So he's always on my desk when I code, even today.
Nice. Yeah, I was telling everybody, I was like, I sort of minimized before I moved to Germany, but I've got this storage unit in Texas still that I've been paying for 5 years, and it's full of
Nice.
my girlfriend laughs in the background, and it's like it's full of all this old EQ stuff, and yeah, the figurines and the books and the maps and all that, and I was like, I wonder if I'm ever going to make any use of this. Maybe I need to find a nice home for it, and since I've started streaming, people are like, I'll take it off your hands, right?
Oh
So
yeah, they'll take it off your hands, or you can find a home for it on eBay.
yeah, yeah, and I'm thinking we'll do some giveaways or something.
Oh, that'd
Um,
be
Level up, Larry. What's going on, dude? Do either of you have a surplus of cloth maps and other unique EQ art? Well, a little bit, as a just mentioned there. So we'll follow up on that topic about getting some giveaways going. I've got to get back to Texas first.
right.
Inkley, thank you for the sub. Welcome. Cool. So sort of hovering around, we're going to probably talk about Kunark for a while, especially as people are filtering in, because I know there are a lot of questions. Um, I mean, like when I look at the map, I look at the continent. You mentioned before that a lot of what happened with Kunark. Um, first of all, I love how intentional. Like when you were describing basically what you were shooting for and what you thought the game needed in terms of feel and like the setup there, like that's it's wonderful to hear that there was like that intent going into it. But
Yeah, but I
you said
ripped
that it
off
was
that
pulled from your
intent.
D&D. What was that?
I totally ripped off the intent because I was a huge and still am a huge Robert E. Howard fan. So I'm much more my fantasy taste is more sword and sorcery than it is high fantasy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So Kunark's more sword and sorcery because it's this dark fallen empire and it has snake people, right? And the Shishar and it has these uh, lizard men who are evil and enslave everybody. So I was going for that Robert E. Howard sword and sorcery sort of feel to it. I wanted it to be a little darker, a little grittier, a little bit more foreboding, um, and maybe less high fantasy. So
Right.
that's it wasn't all me. I was drawing from author influences, but it did all come from my campaigns that I had put together. It's an amalgam of probably two or three campaigns. And Veneral Satyr was like one of the characters in my campaign. So
And you'd used them before.
yeah, in tabletop campaigns, Veneral was one of the antagonists.
Right on. Zaid, welcome, dude. I know you're going to have some questions. So Zaid got asked, Kevin, do you recall anything about the zone-wide storm effects which were envisioned for Kunark but never made it into game? I read some old design docs that talked about storms that could roll through a zone and cause spells to temporarily do bonus damage, but cost more mana, etc.
Yeah, I think we had plans for a full weather system that would float around, and that was actually carried forward. Those plans to do that on Vanguard when I worked on Vanguard. So Brad had wanted to get some weather systems to come through, and we had the idea of magical storms that would really mess people up. They would have to seek shelter and so forth. I'd actually coded uh, werewolfism in EverQuest, so that didn't really ever go live, and I think vampirism as well. So we had played with different things, different concepts, but they just didn't get in because there was higher priorities, and we didn't feel it was the best bang for our technological and content buck.
I swear I remember seeing documentation to that effect and like references, and I thought it was internal references, not just stuff that was out in the community. And I could have sworn that we had conversations about the feasibility of it, and there were still concerns about the application of certain like effects given our spell system to that many, potentially that many player characters, and not being able to control that variable. And then what happens if you've got 300 people rolling through, that kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
then it never materialized. But it's interesting to hear that then carried over into Vanguard, like that concept.
hmm I think where you see that concept manifested by Sony would be Planetside 1, where some of the content, or continents rather, had dust storms and other things pop up that would basically blind you or kill visibility. Now, unfortunately, the players could just turn it off, right? So it would become a non-issue. So then you're really only immersing yourself because some guy still sees you to shoot you.
Right.
But that was one place where weather, one product where weather was tried for being instrumental in gameplay, and that was fun.
There's a question in chat that's from Zemus, asking, did Veneral's family storyline, amulet, body of morale, etc., come from previous campaigns, or was that added by the design team?
No, that's I wrote all that. That's from previous campaigns. I had the concept that though Veneral would be temporarily destroyed, that he would come back. He would find a way back through an ancestor's body.
Right on. Bobby, you're not late. We just started a little bit early. Sorry about that. We were doing a sound. We started by just sort of doing my usual check to make sure I can actually make video work. Oddly, it's hard sometimes, and it just started rolling. So once it started rolling, there was no stopping. There's too much good info coming out. Um, yeah. So let's see. Were Drolvargs the dogmen who served Veneral Sathir a form of lycanthrope? Or if so, was there a race in mind for who they came from? Like, was Veneral Sathir transforming the old pre-FV high elf settlers into Drolvargs? They'd asked.
That I don't know because that was purely design coming up with that. I had no concept of those in my original lore.
Hmm.
I did have a concept of a powerful werewolf that was contesting uh, the Ixar and pretty much everyone else, but working at times with them to achieve its own ends.
The let's see the when I look at the map, I mean, was so was that something that you'd provided? Was basically, it sounds like you gave a decent amount of framework. Was the continent itself something that you already had in mind? um, did you kind of
The,
hand it over like that?
so the continent was already pre-drawn as far as the shape, and some of the areas they're already named. So the over there, I believe, was already there and named. And what I did is wrote that history and then lore for all of these areas, and then began to put down sort of where I thought these ancient cities, ruins, and dungeons would end up being, and trying to trying to spread them out in a way and organize them in a way where there was going to be a decent amount of content all over the continent,
Mm,
so it wouldn't all be basically stuck on one side.
right.
Um, but I don't remember how much of the areas of the continent did I have to name or sort of draw on the map. I remember drawing a map more than so I drew several maps in my notes. So I was drawing Kunark maps from thousands of years ago, and then I would draw them during each age, major age, how things had changed up into the present time.
Right.
And that was to, not that the players were going to get to experience that, but it was to give the design team context on what had happened and where things are at today, so they could link things together meaningfully in their lore.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's got to help the art team as well, right? That's one of the other things that I think Zaid does an incredible job. Like when you watch his stream and he's going through Kunark, especially recently, he's been playing some new tunes there. And when you look and sort of point out like the fact that hey, you can tell that there there is a lot going on here, even if it's just a ruin now that you're passing by on the way to something bigger. The it feels like that history is baked in a way that is hard to do. Having tried to do it in past expansions as well. If you did provide that sort of timeline, I can see how that really helps. Like, all right, the artists piece in all the imaginary details.
I think also something that the art team did that was stellar was the the making of some of these runes and pillars and ancient things large and imposing. So
Mm-hmm.
you really felt like when you were running through the swamp or whatnot, you see this like Kern's Tower or something like that. You're struck by sort of the size and grandeur of it, but it's in ruins. So you get that sense of there was stuff here before. It's ancient. There's probably fat loot in there. I want to go in and beat things up.
Yeah. Perfect. Um, as it was coming together, so I'm sure you're pretty busy, you know, working both on the code side, but then were you like pretty hands on with the artists and like looking at what they're doing and guiding that process or?
No, I didn't have to work much with art. I was mostly doing user interface and gameplay code uh, as my day job.
Yeah.
Um, they would show me uh, concept sketches of the Ixar, for example, or other creatures, and they were always amazing. So I was like, "Yep, there you go. That's it. Good." I mean, we had great artists, so and great animators, and great environment people. So it was. I don't think I ever looked at a piece of art and said, "No, that's not it. Let's go a different direction." It didn't happen. It happened
But
on other projects where I look at stuff and I'm like, "No, that's not right." But
what
not
do you
on
think the
not
difference
on.
was?
I mean, there was only like 20 of us or something. You have a small team, and it's pretty intimate, and you're with everybody all the time, and so there's a shared. I think there's a shared consciousness or a shared set of creative principles that are guiding what you're doing when it's that small, right? So,
Yeah.
and we had a pretty strong visionary, right? So Brad had a pretty solid vision of what he was excited to present, and then so did the design team. Like Bill Trost uh, was able to articulate to the artists very easily, sort of what he wanted to see or what he was hoping to see, and they were excellent at turning that around and making it happen. So it's
Yeah.
just a good confluence of good people and a good project.
Yeah, it's always been hard for me to like look back and kind of separate the sort of stars in my eyes from being a fanboy when I got there from just like the objective like analysis of what was going on. But I just it felt like those early years, people were just on fire. Like they were really just making great shit. It was um
We were on fire. So we're young, so that helps. When you're drinking like 6 to 12 Mountain Dews a day, that certainly helps. Um, we were really passionate about this project because we were all role playing like tabletop nerds. So the chance to manifest this uh, online for other people to play 24/7 was really exciting. And I think from that standpoint, everybody just poured their heart and souls into it. Right? It was a passion project, and that's where you get the best results in the game industry. Is when you have devs that are really passionate about the project they're trying to manifest.
absolutely. And it's shocking, and sometimes it's just sad. It's not really shocking. It's sad when that opportunity doesn't exist for a team, and you can tell they're just not that into it. Because I've seen both, and yeah, during that period when like we were all just blown away and passionate, it's completely different atmosphere. It kind of segues to a question Nick had, which was, what were you most proud of or geeked out to see come to life in game from your original campaigns?
I think it was seeing Veneral Sathir there as a real entity that was a raid, right? I think for me that was really interesting because I had this villain in my campaigns that I was excited about, and but never thought that it would ever go anywhere after that. And then here in this Kunark expansion, people can go kick his ass and get his loot. So for me, I think that was probably the coolest thing. But just the whole thing to see Kunark come together was pretty amazing. And then personally, to play it, for me to actually get in there uh, with my brother. My brother was like you, Sean. He dropped everything and came out to San Diego to work on EQ and get in the game industry. So we just got in and we just played the hell out of that expansion and loved it. And I've gone back years later. I think the last time I did was maybe 2014 or 2015, and then rolled up an XR character and died immediately to some newbie skeletons. It was great.
Yeah, that had to have been crazy though, right? Like to actually go into your world, sort of your campaign actualized. Just
Yeah,
whoa,
it was great
goosebumps.
because I had set up a framework or a history that was the high level stuff, but all the mid to low level implementation, that was all design, and I didn't have any time to play test any of that shit. So for me, when I go in to play this, it's brand spanking new, and I don't really know anything. It's not like I walk in the Kern's Tower and I know what's going on, right? That stuff is all much more granular.
Oh,
And so for
interesting.
me,
Yeah.
right, so I know the high level things, and I know there's a Cebalus out there, and I can't wait to go to it. But I know Trakanon's out there, right? But I don't know how I'm going to get there or what's going to be involved and what I have to contest in order to make it happen. And for me, that was the coolest thing because, like you, I was able to experience the greatness of the design content and all the art. But at the same time, knowing that the history and the lore from campaigns past that I had made was there as well. So I
Yeah.
got the best of both worlds. If I had play tested the hell out of it, it's maybe a little less exciting when you play it at launch. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a strategy for me is to not play the game's content uh, if I can avoid it. I only play content to the extent that I have to, as a programmer, fix bugs and defects and work with art and design.
Yeah. And then the rest is a nice surprise. No, that's great.
Exactly right.
That's got to be nice.
That
Uh,
doesn't that doesn't apply to like Planetside and Planetside 2 because that's player driven content, so it's just PvP. But for
Yeah.
something like PvE, definitely I like to keep that hidden for myself.
No, that's got to be nice. Um,
Okay, here we go. I need tips on how to start game dev. I'm an Unreal person. Love Unreal. I'm just gonna say go get Unreal Engine, and there's a billion videos on YouTube, and you can make a game in Unreal in a week.
yeah. Yeah. Just get started. And then all the how do I get into a company and how do I get into the industry and all that. That's first get started. Yeah.
So for me, the path to getting in the industry is I would learn one of the big engines like Unity or Unreal. And for me, I'm going to tell you Unreal because I love working with Epic Games, and that's what I've used for many years. So I'm most comfortable with it. And then once you've learned that, and you can develop your own game, and you can do it completely in blueprints if you can't program. And
Yep.
there's art assets up the yin yang for both engines on their stores, and every month there's free content, at least on the Unreal store. So you can get so much free stuff. Mega scans, textures are free now on Unreal, so you can have a professional, blown out looking terrain with trees and grass and everything, and you could get that up in a couple days. So all you got to do really is just put in the work. Now, once you have a game and it's functional and you think it's good, then you can start uh, applying to game companies and using that as your resume. People ask me, do I have to get a degree, go to a university and get something in game design or anything? It's preferable. It'd be nice to have that, but um, people have been hired just because they produce something really amazing and they're really passionate.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially now that it exists. I think when I was first getting started,
There's
I don't
nothing
know that
for
it
you
existed. Yeah.
to.
The bit of advice I give people though with like getting started that worked for me, and I know it's a different era, things moved on, but I've been a hiring manager now for almost 20 years as well, and I think it still holds true. If people are really passionate about getting into the industry, but they don't know where to start, but they know they want to get in, I'm just like, there are so many different opportunities. I know a guy that's a professor of art now that when his dad asked me, because he was installing my hardwood floors, he's like, my son thinks he needs to do X, Y, and Z. I was like, first of all, here's the email address to a couple artists that can help him with his portfolio, but
Right.
like, get into QA, get into
That's
CS,
right.
like, get your foot in the door. And if you're really that no bullshit and you're really that passionate, people will see it. And he did. And it's funny, he went in through QA, and then within like a couple month period, they started crunching on the art side, needed some more artists, and just happened to know
Mhm.
he was an artist, and that's it, right? So
That's it. I mean, it's happened to so many people in the industry, myself included. I started in QA at a company called Mindscape in 1989. And one of my coworkers, one of my friends, um, had continued with them out to Cali. And then he went on the producer track from QA, right? As QA can go on different tracks. You can go into
mhm.
production, you can go into art, you can go into design, sometimes coding. And then you know, eight years later or whatever, or 6 years later or whatever, he calls me up and says, "Hey, I need a coder for this Rallycross game. Do you want to come out and do it?" So QA is a winning strategy for getting your foot in the door. The main thing with working at any video game company is get your foot in the damn door,
Yeah, I'd
and
be
then work hard, bust your ass.
yeah. I honestly, I would take a janitorial job. I've been a janitor
Right.
before in a less cool environment, right? But like, I've just always found that if you're, I think a lot of people, they think they want to do a thing, and I'm like, if you really wanted to do it, you'd be doing it. Like, do it. Like, you've been giving you a little bit of advice, but like, get your foot in the door. Be a janitor. Fucking deliver pizzas to the place until you get to know everybody's name, and then tell them your hopes and dreams and see what happens. So.
That's right.
A bit off topic, Nick said, from the EQ stuff, but can you talk a little bit more about your work on Planetside Next? What was that all about? Was it an upgrade for the original Planetside? What kind of cool changes were made to it, and
It
why was it
was.
ultimately scrapped?
Yeah, Planetside Next was we're going to take the Planetside 1 engine and uh, try and make it better, upgrade it. Um, and we tinkered with it for probably 8 to 9 months, and different design concepts. Uh, and as part of that, I was actually working on putting in, like more modern shading techniques. So I was writing like HLS, HLSL shaders and doing some bump mapping. And it became apparent that the PlanetSide 1 engine was pretty dated, and it wasn't necessarily going to be able to do all the things that we really wanted to do graphically and from a networking and infrastructure standpoint. So looking at the Free Realms engine, which was very robust and much more modern, we we said we did an analysis and said it would be faster if we did a PlanetSide 2 uh, than if we did a PlanetSide Next and had to re-author everything. So that was sort of why PlanetSide Next became PlanetSide 2. The team that was on PlanetSide Next uh, became the PlanetSide 2 team.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent a little bit of time with the Planetside team. We tried to do a like a modern mercenary shooter
Right.
as sort of an iteration. I think we ran into similar conclusions. It was like, especially with the UI and some other elements, we were going to be starting from scratch, and that exceeded the whole just reskin it and get it out the door sort of timeline that
Right.
we were offered.
Yeah, PlanetSide Next was an attempt or a look at it. If we went, we reskinned this and we updated some of the combat mechanics to be more modern shooter mechanics. What would that take? What would that look like? And and then how successful do we think it would be at appealing to the fans?
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, we just made the determination that PlanetSide 2 is a better way to go. Use our most modern technology and make it as pretty as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I still play PlanetSide 2 today. I played it last night, so it's a great game that I still enjoy. It's not a perfect game, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, Nick is extremely passionate about all things Planetside here in chat, and so he has got me. He is basically convinced me that I've got to get Planetside 2 installed. Matter of fact, I think it wasn't for the fact that I took a couple days off of streaming to actually barbecue and drink some beer this weekend. I probably would have
Good
already
call.
installed it, but I'll definitely want to check in starting this week. So look forward to it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's mind blowing. You're gonna be it's rough though. Get in with people that you can group up with, because if you're alone, you're gonna get annihilated.
yeah.
Just gonna get annihilated. There's just these fights are like hundreds of people in some cases, and you without experience and without all the perks of leveling up, it's hard to know where you are and who's killing you.
I'll see if Nick can be my battle buddy and get me in
That's what you
there.
want.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Run
but
with his outfit.
oh, okay. Nice. So, because I was blown away by PS1, like Planetside was just the craziest thing I'd ever played. You know, uh, it felt like, it was a bit floaty. It wasn't super precise or whatever, but I didn't care. It was just so much fun seeing, like those bridge battles and other big battles. So,
Oh yeah.
combined arms, super
Oh
cool.
yeah. So much fun.
Bobby asked, "What's the coolest EQ merch you snagged on the way out?"
Gosh, I got so my wife's the pack rat, so I would get they got us crazy stuff back in the day. So I would get lunch pails that were EverQuest lunch pails. I would get jackets, Sony jackets, Crash Bandicoot, like denim coats. That's a crazy one I still have. All kinds of PlayStation bags and gosh, I got original copies of the game and the expansion still boxed and sealed. But my wife has them all in a merch box, right? And if I want to go touch it, she's like, "Get away from there." So she won't let me really poke around. Uh, but I got a lot of stuff. I have prints signed by Keith Parkinson. I don't even know. Just gobs of stuff. I'll never sell it though. I'll just give it to my kid.
Right on. No, that's amazing. I will have to
Tony
adopt
was always
somebody
good.
out of chat.
They
I
were
don't have
always
any.
good at merch, you know. They were always good about showering us with stuff.
Yeah, it always seemed like there was a ton of cool shit. Um, let's see. Vanifax asked, "What is your favorite dungeon in Kunark, and why is it Cryptodonier? Do you know what the thought process behind the zone was, and why it's so hidden?"
Uh, I, I, they wanted to make that. They wanted to make the crypt something that was hard to access, hard to find, and special. And that's really the only reason. Is to just give it that extra special wow factor. For me, probably my favorite dungeon is Sebalus. That's my own personal preference. Though I did the most PvPing in Kern's Tower and around that area. So I did play a lot on the Talonzek server and played on the not Kunark side. So I was playing on the Goodly Races side.
Can't remember the guild names there, but I was a GM there briefly and had to deal with all of the complaints and crying and nonsense on Talon. It was a lot of fun though.
Yeah, the strategy on Talon for us is we made characters, I think, that were level 25 and they never leveled beyond that. And we did that because there was an 8 level range. So we wanted to be able to destroy everyone between like 17 and 33 or something. And it was the perfect range game mechanic wise to sort of do that. So we were extremely geared and we would roll around in a band of 8 very well balanced PvPers and we would just wipe out things. I just remember taking out so many people around Kern's Tower and the beach, of course, the Oasis. That was always a great. So we actually would lap it. We kill everyone in the Oasis beach trying to level up, and then we go to Kern's Tower and kill everyone there.
Did you D-level? Wacky Marv asked if you D-leveled to get to that point or if you just stopped there.
We just stopped there, and then we made sure that we weren't killing any more mobs, so we wouldn't level up. And we had a really high level alt character that was like 50 something, the druid, that would teleport us around. So we just run laps and eventually you get a posse of people after you and they eventually do run you down and kill you, but then we would just rinse repeat start again.
Right on.
Getting hit with the blind spell in PvP and EQ sucks because it
Yes.
turns your whole screen like off, so you're like, hey, my monitor broke. Like there's no indication you're still in a game. It's really bad, so
We
people
were
just stand there.
we were just watching a streamer playing. It may have been on P99 though, but watching someone play, and they were yeah, they was it the Muddites got hit with a blind spell and the screen went black, and I'm showing my girlfriend and she's just like, "What happened?" I'm like,
Right,
"It's a spell." Like
it's a spell.
when it first hit you though, you thought your computer broke.
Yeah, the shit I used to do, I would go to one of the parties in Oasis that was an enemy, the enemy faction. I would be disguised as a dark elf. I would ask to join their party. They would invite me. I would join it. And then when I was casting spells, I'd be behind the party, so I would buff them with breeze or whatever. I was an enchanter. And then re-illusion myself to be a dark elf, and they weren't paying attention. They're just pulling mobs. And I'd wait, and then when they overpull a little bit, I'd charm an extra crocodile and send it in on the cleric. And then so the healer would die, the tank would die, and then I'd finish off the rest of them. But we did some nasty, nasty stuff back then.
Chat approves. The chat does approve.
Yeah, another thing I would do is be the illusion palm tree and just hang out on the beach waiting for somebody to run by and then kill them that way. Palm tree starts casting on them.
Beautiful.
I remember
So
getting chased by 20 people, I think, into Kern's tower, and the enchanter is a minor illusion spell. I turned into a torch sconce and positioned myself against the wall, and they ran around for probably 30 minutes, never found me.
beautiful. I
Evil.
I yeah, I'm just waiting for chat's response on some of these, just because I think there's definitely got to be some appreciation there. So was your chantier your main? Chat is asking.
So on the PvP server, the 25th enchanter was my main for that PvP group. The other character I had was a Necro, Erudite Necro. But in EQ proper in the on the Bluebee servers, I had just a regular tank, and it sucked so bad because, as you know, back in the day, tanks can't solo anything. So
Yeah.
I was, if there was no group, I wasn't playing that tune. So I was playing my main solo character, duo character, was a necromancer because I could, of course, an XR necromancer, so I could kite shit. When I say
Another
Bluebee server, I mean like player not player versus player.
yeah.
You know, not the PvP servers, the co-op servers where we all hang out and sing Kumbaya together.
So another
Yeah,
question
the servers.
regarding Kunark. Was there anything big that was cut that you wish had made it in from the stuff that you threw out there?
Honestly, not. Um, I feel like the team pretty much tackled everything that they wanted to do. I don't recall. There's certainly little coding features or something that had to wait
Hmm.
to Velius, right? But as far as the content and stuff goes, I think, like I mentioned, some of the mobs were short on loot tables.
Yeah.
So you would have some red name mobs, and they're rares, and they're obviously not placeholders, and they should drop something because they're hard as hell to kill, but there's nothing. So I would say that's there was just some NPCs left on the cutting room floor that for whatever reason didn't get assigned to loot table. But other than that, I thought everything was that's there.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, from your description, it almost seems like it might have even exceeded your original like expectations for how it was going to materialize. Um,
Absolutely did. Oh,
yeah.
any
How,
other classes planned for the Ixar that got cut? Yeah, I remember we talked about having them be more classes than we ended up allowing them to be. Um, uh, but I don't recall the exact ones that didn't make the cut. We felt we yeah, Ixar Rogue, of course, but we felt like uh, they have pretty good racial abilities, and they're already they're already kind of cool. So we didn't want to give them the you can be every class uh, race, kind of like humans. Humans get to be all the things. We thought it would be nice if we limited it and bent it more toward the evilish classes,
mm-hmm.
if that makes sense,
Yeah, it
or at
does.
least the non-goodly classes, because their empire was an evil empire. The itemization built around the the classes, the classes.
Yeah. Let's
Right.
see.
Why was the
Yeah.
itemization sparse? Oh, well, I don't know. Working a lot of hours and you're putting in content for the dungeons, and sometimes you forget about rogues. Rogues
Well,
need love too. They need daggers.
so I wanted to pull a couple more questions from chat, but I also have my own question of just like about because you mentioned team size and pretty small. I'm curious about the process
Pretty
and
small.
just if you could go through team size again and just what that looked like behind the scenes. Because again,
Sure.
I saw Luckland. Luckland was when I got there and it was pretty chaotic. I'm
Right.
curious what you saw, and then I'll grab these other questions from chat. Sorry, chat.
So I think team size originally somewhere around 20 full time, and then there was supporting people that were writing things like like our socket layer for for network communication. Um, so the dev process was we have meetings and basically decide what what we wanted to do content wise, and then get buy-in from everybody, and then from that develop a list of features the code would have to implement to support that, and then just go off to the races, and then reconvene and test it. The one thing I can say about the EverQuest to Kunark days is there was a lot of internal play testing going on. We played the game vociferously, and we uh, were doing that even when we weren't working. So that's, I think, a big part of why a small team was able to make a game that was fun, is because we were all playing it all the time. So if it wasn't fun, that would be torturous. And
Right.
so I've always carried that philosophy forward in all the games that I've worked on, where if I'm not playing the game I'm working on, then uh, it's not fun. So it needs to change. It needs to get fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, so I know we'll hop to it in a little bit, but your current company. I guess I was going to ask the question: do you think it's feasible to build the kind of game that was built in those early EQ days with a similar size team and you know
It absolutely is.
yeah,
I think if you have the right passionate people with modern tools, think about like modern tools like Unreal Engine.
absolutely.
You could build something that 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 was great. Now, could you build a seamless modern MMO where you walk seamlessly across a vast landscape? No, it would have to be zone based because you wouldn't have the tech for that. Um, you would need also to find a way for your map servers to communicate with some sort of backplane persistence layer, so that you could send chat messages across these maps, or
Mm,
uh, have players persist their data, and so forth. So while there are some technical hurdles, it's absolutely possible for a small team of passionate people to develop something like EQ.
yeah,
I think that content is king, so you have to. The game design is the most important part. If you have game design but you don't really have art and code, you can still have a fun, engaging game like Minesweeper. But
right.
if you don't have good design and you just have great art and code, you just have a tech demo, and nobody wants to
Right.
play a tech demo.
Yeah. No, no, I'm glad to hear that. I That's a common theme on this stream. When we don't have guests on, then the folks that are here have to hear me babble about stuff like that. And so my last two companies have been very small niche MMO companies, and I'm like, guys, I've seen behind the scenes, I've seen the KPIs. Like it is feasible in my mind. If you, especially if you come in it with like go zone based, like
That's right.
make certain compromises that existed back then. We can still make a badass game. I think it's doable at a much smaller scale than people realize. There are those games that are basically shooting to, put a dent in the universe or whatever, and we'll probably be talking about AOC a little bit later. But like, I for me, my ambitions, when I look at like if I were able to just start a new game, it'd be pretty humble, man. Like I have no problems working on a nice humble iteration of something like an EQ1.
Yeah, you can make a fantastic, compelling experience with a modern engine like Unreal or Unity, and make it zone based. and it's going to be very compelling. So if you think about your terrain size, it's going to be somewhere between 1K square and maybe 4K or something, and it's a very large chunk of real estate to run around in.
Yeah.
And if you're putting some dungeons in there that you're zoning to, I mean, you can have a lot of content. So if your game is a PVE based game and it's not player versus player, and you don't need that seamless interaction, then by all means make it zone based.
Cool. I think I've always just loved it for whatever reason. Over the years, I've played the seamless ones, and I appreciate them, both technically, artistically, or whatever. But there's just something about that experience of zoning into a new place, and that little bit of a disconnect. Uh, I don't mind zoning from one zone into like a completely different type of zone. It's never been a problem. Um, let's see, a couple of
I've
questions from.
never I've never dual box or multi box to that last one.
All right. And then how did the conversation leading up to XR Monk go? Were there any people on the inside that were opposed to it, wanted to keep it in human only? Do you remember?
Uh no, we were pretty adamant about everyone was kind of, as far as I recall, was pretty adamant about Ixar Monk because we felt like this ancient empire would have some pretty dope martial training, right? And over its history would develop its own fighting techniques. And because of that, and also we had the opportunity to do an Ixar tail swipe as an animation. I mean, come on, you can't
Yeah.
pass that up. So Ixar Monk turned out to be, I think, my brother's favorite character. So I'm glad we put it in. He played the shit out of that. That and the Shadow Knight.
And so the Green Mist storyline.
Awesome.
So was that part of? Did you hand that over, or was that something that evolved in
I had
terms of?
nothing to do with that. As far as like that entire thing was all the design team, and I thought it was so cool. I just like it was great.
Badass.
Yeah, my brother loved that. So he actually got Green Mist, and I remember him. He would call me up on the phone and just bitch up a storm. Like, this is just insane. You know the shit I got to go through to get this thing. I'm like, not really. I'm not planning. I'm playing a necro, man. I just kite shit. Have fun.
Right on. Yeah. I'm hoping he's talking about the earlier steps in the quest. I can't honestly remember the end of it, but according to one of our guests, I put it in. So, and then when I read the text, it does sound like something I'd write. So, I
That's awesome.
apologize to him if it was too shitty of a time. Let's see. Vulark asked, what was the design philosophy for Ixar not being able to wear plate armor?
Um, I don't think any. I think we didn't want them to be like main tanks. We wanted them to be sort of like lighter, faster combatants, and I think that's probably it.
The
I mean, they should be able to wear plate if they're going to tank, but it is what it is.
Scrolling through more questions. All the XR weapon quests are amazing. Other stuff.
No, nobody put me in their quests. Somebody put me in World of Warcraft, but not in EQ. Then they're going to put me in as a frog lock so that people can kill me at level 1 just to torch me, which would be pretty awesome.
And then Bobby asks, former guest spoke about you guys designing Kunark with the idea that it would be the first and only expansion. Is that also how you approached it?
Yeah, we didn't know, right? So if you look at an average video game, it has a shelf life of n years. Particularly, we were coming from Sony, which was more console based, right? This was not a PC game company. So you think you launch a game, maybe you have a sequel to it or an expansion, and then that IP sort of fizzles for a while, and then you roll on to something else, and then you maybe you spool up Rev 2 or 3 down the road. That would be the typical model. So at the time, EQ's doing gangbusters. We figured, yeah, we'll keep it going with Kunark and then see what happens. But like, if you would have told me we'd be sitting here 20 years later talking about this game, I would not have believed it.
No, maybe by the 10th year. Then it started. As I was at
Maybe.
other companies, I was like, holy shit, a couple of these are not going to go away. We, we should be building games with 20, like a 20-year sort of lifespan in mind, and see what happens. At least then we'd have more headroom, I guess, and itemization and other stuff.
That's more possible today too, Sean, because if you're building it in one of these engines like Unity or Unreal, and those engines are constantly updating the fidelity of their graphics and whatnot,
Yeah,
it's possible now to have a game that iteratively develops and improves over a long span of time. Whereas with something like EverQuest, it was much easier to create EverQuest 2, right? To start with a new, better code base, fresher concepts and tools, and go forward.
yeah, or at least that was the belief.
That was the belief.
Yeah. Um, Sorry guys, I know I'm missing a few of these. We'll scroll up. Nick is on the bottom here, so it's easy for me to spot, but it also takes us into sort of the next step. Can you talk a little bit about your work on Vanguard? I know there is something between those two. We were talking a little bit as we were getting warmed up about the work you did when you, I think that was when you went to Hong Kong, right? So there was EverQuest, and then uh, it's interesting because it seems like it gets us back into the PvP topic as well, which I know a few people were asking about. The two companies that you co-founded.
Yeah. So after Kunark, I had co-founded a company to do a um, superhero MMO, and we were partnered with Square Japan, and they were funding it. But then the Spirits Within came out, and they canceled all funding.
Hmm.
So after that, somebody said, "Hey, I got a gig in Hong Kong working on Shadowbane Asia, so localizing Shadowbane for 7 countries or something in Asia." So my wife's from Philippines, which isn't too far away. I'm like, "Hey, you want to do Hong Kong?" She's like, "Yeah, let's go." So we went over there for 2.5 years. I worked on that. I worked on an MMO engine, uh, patcher, and graphics engine, um, and more PvP, like you said. And then after that, I went to work on Vanguard, which was not a PvP focused game, but like Nick is asking, was Unreal Engine 2 a good choice? It was. The tool set on Unreal Engine 2 was pretty good at that point. Our artists could lay down terrain, and we were using speed trees, so we could populate it with flora. Um, I would say the challenges we had is we wanted it to be seamless, but that technology is very alien to the way that Unreal is architected. So we went for fast zone based, right? So you get to a zone line and at least it transfers fast. And we had to customize a lot of the network communication. And Ryan Elam, who was the lead, did a lot of customization and reworking of the rendering pipeline to make it better. But it was a good choice for us because it got us to the finish line. Um, the world of Vanguard was extremely huge, and
Yeah.
to make all that in any other tool set, I think would have been pretty rough. It just needed a lot of help on the hitching and asynchronous loading, so it really didn't get fixed up and polished. I think for about a year after it launched.
Yeah, and a couple of people have talked about that period. We've had Todd in here, and Doug was just here, and so it's it it feels like had they had more time to basically work through, um, some of that just I don't know if that's tuning polish or what, just iteration time would have been massive for it. Can you speak to anything about sort of that period and what was going on with regards to time and how that was affecting you?
Yeah, I think the mistake that was made on Vanguard, so it was opposite day of how EQ was developed. So EQ was developed in a way where we had these different systems, whether it was Jeff's spell system or our combat system or uh, the way that the zones were being constructed by art, and these these were all put up sort of one zone at a time. So I believe Kinos was the first zone we stood up, and we got that working. And once that was working, we did Kinos Hills, and then we did Blackborough. So there
Mm-hmm.
was a progression, right? We're putting everything in the game and having everything connected and playable in one place, in one microcosm. And
Yeah.
then we're expanding, rinse, repeat, create the other 50. I don't even know how many zones for the release product. So that was the right way to develop a game. The wrong way was what we did on Vanguard, hindsight being 2020, where we developed a lot of systems sort of independently of each other and then brought them together at a late date and glued them together to make the game and then
Yeah.
found out, oh shit, this doesn't work, the performance isn't there, we didn't think about XYZ. And uh, I feel like had we developed one playable area first
Mm-hmm.
and expanded out like we did on EQ, it would have been a better result. Also, would have been a better result for uh, profiling and finding these performance hitches and other issues. And then, as you said, we could have used more time to polish for sure, right? Because gluing all those things together revealed a lot of surprises.
Yeah.
Once the game was stable and it was streaming nicely, I absolutely loved it. I played the hell out of that game. So many characters, and really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that it was harder than most other games in the genre,
Mm-hmm.
and I would go into some of these dungeons and just get my ass kicked.
The
I mean,
so
I'd
the
curse and I'd break shit, but I'd still love it. I'd go back.
but that's part of the fun. I mean, that's part of the that makes me just want to come back in more. But
Yeah,
yeah, the way you're describing it coming together, then with that in mind, then the timing really it does paint a picture of like if you're pulling that many disparate systems together, if you're pulling that scale of work together, then you have to have that extra time to see basically how it's going to come together and what that's going to reveal. So,
that's
um,
right. And in Unreal 2, the profiling capabilities aren't there to the extent now that Unreal 4 has. Unreal 4 has incredible profiling uh, capabilities, and you can discover what is slow and what is screwing you. It
mhm.
has hitch detection, so you know when you're doing hitched loading of assets, and because of that, that even makes it easier for somebody to make their own game nowadays because all this stuff's online and it shows you how to profile your own stuff and it'll just tell you straight up this function right here is the problem, go fix it.
Right.
So that's something that we didn't necessarily have back in the day. We had to use third party tools and our brains.
Yeah, I could have sworn on DC Universe we were using like 2.5. It's like Unreal 2.5, I thought, on the way to
Right.
3.
But
Um,
so heavily modded and the servers are like
yes.
customized. Yeah.
Yeah, and it felt like a lot of what you're describing being online now just wasn't online yet then either.
That's right.
And we were doing the whole streaming zones, and yeah, it was many. We spent a few years just sitting there as a designer writing documents for like a good year while everything was being gutted and put back together. So,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
um, I'm curious then. So with just sort of hitting on Shadowbane while you're there. So on the tech side, we've talked about Shadowbane a little bit as well in here because again we talk a lot about MMOs and then we talk a lot about sort of feasibility and issues we've seen in the past. Shadowbane felt like another one that was like really ambitious, some cool
Right.
concepts in there, and then on the technical side, it was still like baking when I played it at least. When you were working with them on the localization, at what point was that in the lifespan?
So it was like the product wasn't released yet. So I actually would fly out to Austin from Hong Kong and spend some time in the office working with them, and then I would shuttle back to Hong Kong and then work on the localization there. Um, they they were trying to put their entire world on one Sun Microsystems box, and that box would have the totality of this. Uh, it was a seed generated world, so the world didn't change, but it could because it was based on a random seed, but the seed was always fixed. So it would generate this procedural world and run everything on this one system, which was much different than EverQuest, where everything's distributed because you have all these different maps, and each map has its own server, right?
Right.
This was one giant instance running on a mini computer. So this thing, I don't even know how much it weighs. It was huge, and I thought single point of failure not good. But they had a bunch of Sun Microsystems engineers come in, and they made it work, and so they were able to get it up and be stable enough to run. I think the thing that struck me where it would fail is I suspected during development that without capping the number of players in a guild and their allies
Mm.
that could be on one side, you just end up with one ring to rule them all. One guild would or alliance would just become supreme, and then you'd kill the whole server, which ended up happening in different regions. So
Yeah.
that was unfortunate. But playing the game, I loved it. I was playing a dual wielding dagger warrior, and I was evil. I'd kill people when they would go to bank, and I'd steal all their shit.
I'm noticing a theme. I got the feeling.
Right, I hate PvP. You can tell.
uh, let's see
Oh, there you go.
the.
Programming tools IDE and EQ is
Yeah, I
like
was about to hit that
Visual
one.
Visual Studio 6. I don't know. It was some super early version of Visual Studio, and before then, I was using the text editors that one uses for PlayStation 1 games. So moving to Visual Studio was pretty fantastic. You had much better debugging capabilities. You could see the call stack, all kinds of goodies, and I develop in Visual Studio today. I can't imagine not developing in Visual Studio as a programmer. I just can't.
C89 duct tape and blood.
Yeah, pretty much. But what was rough about Visual Studio, I guess, is as they would come out with new iterations, right, things would break, so we'd have to update it. But whatever. My favorite non-epic quest in Kunark. I don't even know. It's probably going to be the whole Green Mist saga. Honestly, it's just so amazing. But that's sort of epic, right?
And it's, yeah, in
Like,
its own right. Any fun bug hunting stories from Kunark?
Uh, I don't think we had anything that was crazy in Kunark that I recall that just drove us batty. I don't recall any crazy bugs. I remember crazy bugs from original EQ, like the fish that was bigger than a zone that killed the frame rate that no one could find because you're inside the fish. The charming of players to kill other players from the skunk spray, that was a good bug. But in Kunark thing, the game had been up for essentially 9 months to a year. I don't remember how long, about a year. So it had become fairly stable. So it was harder and harder for us to introduce new and interesting bugs.
I do
I mean,
remember players falling through Field of Bone. I remember that from
yes,
customer service because I was having to
yeah.
summon players.
So we had, if you back then, if when you make Geo, if you just have a tiny seam and the player runs over it and it doesn't detect collision, adios, you fall through the world. or if the poly wasn't marked for collision for whatever reason. The other thing that we would have in Kunark that I do recall is you have the copy loot table issue where somebody copies the dragon's loot table onto a goblin and then intends to, just have it drop some mundane things, but forgets. And now some mundane creatures dropping really good, really good loot. So I mean that kind of fat fingered copy paste errors happen from
Yeah.
time to time.
Oh yeah, especially in that database. Frank DeBank said Final Green Mist was made by a bad player, in his opinion. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it.
Nice. Well, it says, was there a plan on the empty crypt in that field of bone? No, but I did use that empty crypt all the time in PvP. That's where we would stage and hide, and we would emerge from that crypt and go kill everyone, and then go back there and heal up again. So I got use out of it, but I think the only thing down in there were spiders or something. I think, and maybe one or two named. Like it wasn't that populated. It could have been cooler. There could have been cool content in there. You're right.
Mhm.
Painting and mural paintings. I don't think so. I think that's just art going ham. They're like, yeah, we need some cool stuff. I'm just gonna make it. Like back in the day, we didn't have this whole concept of art direction per se. People would get a zone to do, and it was like their baby. So they would
Mhm.
work with design, and they'd come up together with sort of a concept, and then you could just go ham. In the modern day, we want to make sure that things are tied together more cohesively, so that if I go to Joe's dungeon and I see stuff relating to this history or lore, and then I go to Beth's dungeon, right? There's congruency there, that they're not completely different alien cultures.
Yeah. There is something about that though that makes it charming, right? When they're
There
so
is.
I get the need for like a red thread and to sort of make sure that they're in the same world, but I do we talk about this a lot. I do think there was something special about the fact that there was a bit of that disconnect between designers and artists and folks back in the day. Um,
All right.
Seems to add like a
Yeah,
layer of mystery.
it does. And it also, if you let people just go ham, a lot of times they can do their best work,
Yeah,
right? As long as there's some like uh, high level oversight. But if they're passionate about something and they're creative, then turn that dimmer to max. Let them go.
absolutely. Um, so what I'm thinking is, as feel free to continue to just grab questions out of chat, but I was thinking that it'd be cool if we continue to move through basically what you've done over the years, and then we'll obviously get to AOC. And I think then that also opens the opportunity for us to sort of bounce around to any of those that may then trigger new questions, if
Right.
you've got time. And so yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we just hit on Vanguard, and then I guess when Vanguard came back into Sony, that's when you're sort of reintroduced into the environment because you go to the planet sides after that, right?
Yeah, having done sword and board games for at that point uh, a long time, um, I was looking for a change, and for me, Planetside was near and dear to my heart. I started playing that in Hong Kong in beta back in this would be something like 2002 to 2004, somewhere in there. And I loved the game, and I was super into it. So I said, I've been doing these fantasy games so long. I want to switch it up. I want to do some shooter games, which I
Mm.
also love as a genre. So PlanetSide was where I flowed into uh, after that, and I was on that whole IP and launched PlanetSide 2, and then maybe a year after launch or something, uh, went back to EverQuest 1 to work on expansion content.
Mm.
And that was pretty fantastic to go back to a project that you basically started your MMO career on. Go back to that and then work in there. That was a blast.
And then after the Planetside sort of work at Sony, I saw as I was going through the CV, um, saw a reference to Creator Safe, and it was interesting. Until I saw it on there, I'd forgotten because I remember Matt Broom. Um,
Right.
he was part of that as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was actually. Matt and I were partnered on that, and then we're partnered in a studio called Hero Machine, where we're working on an Unreal cover and shoot uh, shooter game. It's basically a loot and scoot RPG. But yeah, I worked with him on that, and we stood up essentially a space where artists could go to the site and then they could collaborate. They could put up their art. They could lock it right behind permissions. And it was a way for them to share and get feedback.
Hmm.
So, sort of like a uh, social media site for artists to share and promote their work.
Yeah.
The issue being we couldn't figure out how to monetize it. Right? It's hard to charge artists anything. There's a reason why it's called starving artists. So
Right. Yeah, I remember when the concept first came out. I thought it was really interesting, and I thought that you guys were looking at that as a possible platform to then also provide visibility, I guess, on artists and different work to people that might want to consume it, whether it be companies or
that's right.
yeah.
Or just
So
private individuals. Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was really rad. And but I think I was in the middle of a lot of moves there and sort of lost track of Matt during that period. So it's interesting to see that come up again. Um, and then what Frank asked, and I've got it in my notes. You're going back to EQ. Frank asked, "What expansion did you come back for?"
Geez, I don't remember. It was after the mercenary expansion. Um, I'm trying to remember what I was working on. I remember I had to alter the interface to the store code for something or other. I don't know. I think those brain cells are erased, but let me go look at EQ expansions by date, and I can tell you.
All right. Let's see. Scrolling up, and guys, if I'm missing any
There's only
specific,
like 50 of them.
yeah. Well, I mean, almost not joking. It's what, 28 now? 26. 26? Um, so it's getting there. If I missed any of the questions in chat, definitely keep them in mind. Feel free to shoot them out again as we go. No harm on that.
So this Call the Forsaken looks like it might be it because mercenary AAs and mercenary gear. Yeah, so it was in that slash Reign of Fear, somewhere in that uh, uh, area.
That makes sense timing wise too, right? Trying to think, because we just had Doug on. He was mentioning some work in that period. Because I
Doug
could have sworn,
Cronkite,
yeah, could have sworn he said that
he's awesome.
he shared a similar regard for you, sir.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I'm
I don't
hoping he
care if he did or
watches
not.
this
He's
before we
still
get him
awesome.
back on. What's that?
Yeah, I don't care if he likes me or not. He's still awesome. He's cool.
No, he spoke very fondly of you. Let's see. The Dave said my question was any fun stories about players being able to kill solo mobs in unintended ways that made the devs have to change things up during that
Oh
period.
yeah, of course. Well, always we had problems with our pathing, so that you could skirt left and right, and basically, get a mob to run at you, put some dots on it, skirt to the other side, and then it would go, oh, never mind, and go all the way back around. So you saw this in different areas and different zones. You saw people being able to get up on top of objects, and the mobs couldn't figure out how to get to them. So they just you just put dots on them and trying to exploit them. So the exploiting of our pathing system and was always an ongoing tough thing that we had to deal with.
Yeah.
Uh, the other thing would be uh, players uh, doing creative training of mobs. So that we really got we really had issues on the PvP server where monks would grab a bunch of high level mobs and they would train them into enemy players and then
Mm-hmm.
feign death, and
Mm-hmm.
then those mobs would instantly aggro on the other players, kill them, and then they'd lose experience. So it became a way to grief people with experience loss. So that I I would say beyond that, where we got into trouble um, would be in certain combat situations where aggro is just too high for XYZ. People would unexpectedly get it and get killed, so we'd have to look at adjusting hate levels on different
Right.
spells or effects or buffs. That was always an ongoing challenge for the design team. And the
Yeah.
fact that as these mobs scaled up and they had way more hit points than our data structures allowed, we had to change our data structures so that they could have millions of hit points or whatever they ended up having.
Yeah. We had Fisher on here, and he was talking about that as well. It's funny when you talk about training. As a GM, I'd get on Talon. People would complain, "So and so trained me." I'm like, "Did you train them back?"
That's the game,
I
right?
mean,
That's the game.
it seems like you've got the ability. Do you not have monks? So let's
Right.
see. Uh, Dave said, follow up. I do pathfinding code quite often. What was the metric used to determine when the pathing was good enough? I think it was a pretty basic A star implementation, right?
You're right. It's a basic A star implementation, and it eventually we would tune it so that we would just say, look, the NPC's distance to you is is such that it's closer to you than if it switches to this other path. So maybe we're just going to let it go for a little longer and see if it likes where it's going. So we're just trying to massage it, but I don't know how it compares to modern EverQuest. Is it any better? I don't know.
I just
I
remember
don't.
that was one of those things. Pathing, fixing pathing was just one of those things that anybody that was coming on the team, you got some exposure to, because we were
Right.
constantly adjusting it.
Right.
Uh,
And then I
Chat
think
says
it's
not
some
really.
or not really, but I think at least there's code now to where if you're exploiting something, it just resets. Right. It either teleports you to it, so now it doesn't have to path to you and it can just wallop you, or it resets. So those are usually when, as developers, we can't figure something out, we teleport you to the problem, or we just make it reset.
Nice. Okay, so we had you at EQ, and then essentially then that led up to your most recent gig, which I think is some people probably have heard a little bit about, maybe.
Yeah, I spent a year working with Matt on the Kinetic game, and then I had started consulting with Intrepid for the Ashes of Creation MMO, and
Hmm.
this was right before they were going to kickstart. So, uh, and after they kickstarted, and I saw how well it was received as a game that was going to be more hardcore and also have some nice end game PvP focus. I really wanted to be a part of it. I mean, it has a lot of elements in it that appeal to me from an MMO's perspective. The fact that you're building this world with other players, that it's responding to your agency, player agency, is
Hmm.
good. The fact that the world changes based on your decisions or how it evolves, and that could be different than World Server B that I have in Alton. That's really nice.
Right.
Uh, the economics of it are fascinating to me. That there's regional banks, that there's not a worldwide bank, and that you have to transport goods and services across dangerous areas, including open water, and risk it getting ripped off by other players or enemy NPCs. So all those things kind of appeal to me. The fact that uh, the vast majority or majority of the POIs are available for contested content, right? So that's fascinating to me because if you remember, we'd all be standing in a dungeon in EQ yelling, you know, whatever level in class looking for a group.
Right.
And I see some of that coming back. Like people are trying to look for groups to go do and then claiming areas to camp. Like, hey, no, we've got the crypt. You can't
Hmm.
get that unless you come in and you kill us. Then you can have it.
Right. It,
So it but at the same time, it's not Talon Zach where you can't murder hobo everyone because there's a flagging system, and that flagging system makes it so that if you are going to be that kind of person, you're going to suffer deleterious effects.
some of the concepts that you're describing, even when you were describing just sort of the fact that you'd have to caravan or transport goods between different regions, etc. Immediately reminded me of the conversations we've had here with guests who are talking about Vanguard and sort of Brad's thoughts in the same regard. I think maybe Todd was hitting on it, maybe Doug. Um, and again, to create that really strong world sense while also then having gameplay that's a natural sort of fallout of that. Do you see other similarities where because I feel like you've you've been a part of the evolution of this genre across products that feel like they've been leading up to the one you're currently working on. Are there more
Yeah,
things?
yeah. I think there's a lot of similarities when I look at the vision for Vanguard and also what the vision for Ashes is. Both games want to be seamless MMOs. Both games want to have compelling economics. Both games wanted to give the players some kind of agency to affect the world. Both games wanted to tend toward a more photorealistic or realistic rendering style.
Mm,
Both games wanted to be more hardcore and have uh, a high risk versus reward metric, right? So,
right.
uh, Ashes of Creation, the way Steven envisions it, it's high risk, high reward. If you're willing to take risks and you excel and you win, then you get rewarded appropriately. If you're not willing to take risks, then you don't. So
Right.
it's in many ways they have similar design philosophies and a similar approach. Um, I think now the tools and the technology is much more readily available and attainable for supporting that in Ashes than it was uh, in the early 2000s,
Yeah, I mean, and
early to mid.
the listening to the recent interviews, I think the clarity with which Stephen articulates like the vision for it feels like there's a degree of confidence when I listen to that when I listen to other interviews in the past for games, etc. There wasn't that same sort of. It was more of like we think we're going to, as opposed to this is what we're doing. Um, and there's definitely been mention to the fact that hey, we've learned from these other games in the past.
Yeah,
Are you
100%.
I mean, do you feel the same way? Do you have that same sort of like this is one of those things that now that the tech is caught up and we've got these lessons in hand, it's a lot less scary, or is it still like I mean, all games are scary, I guess, but
MMOs are the scariest because we're talking particularly in this game of having castle sieges or taking down a full city or a metropolis with hundreds of people fighting it out. So,
mm,
doing large scale sims like that is always a challenge. But you're right about the conviction level. The conviction level is certainly there. Like we're convinced this is exactly what we're doing and this is what we're making and this is what it's going to be. And that's what we're building and that's what's happening. And so that's very refreshing. Like the vision for the game is very thoughtful and very good and very well laid out. So there might be things that we don't know at the minutia level that we play test or we massage, but on the whole, having that direction is fantastic. Having that conviction is fantastic. Steven's been playing games since he was MMO since he was 7 years old, and he's just it's his favorite genre. He's super into it. He came out of retirement to make that game, so he's gonna make his dream game, come hell or
Yeah.
high water.
I mean, looking at it, so I started playing. There's a great write up, or not write up, but video by the Lazy Peon that sort of goes through pretty quickly. Like, hey, here are all the high points. And for me, as someone that was just kind of catching up with a lot of this stuff, like seeing, basically hearing the conversation with Steven and Asmund, like as I go through this, first of all, it's, I mean, it looks fantastic. What I've seen
Yeah,
of it is incredible. Um, and then to hear these systems articulated, and in a way where when I listen to it, I'm like, well, shit, that just makes sense. Yeah, I guess. Okay, that makes sense. I got to be honest. I'm always going to be like skeptical until I'm like hands on and seeing something. But again, the
right.
level of conviction is huge.
Yeah, it is. The I love the design and the way that it flows. And what I also love is if you're into player versus player stuff, the game will appeal to you. If you're not, you never have to do it. It's going to be fine, right? I mean, you might get ganked occasionally, but other than that, it's going to be rare. People don't want to flag for PvP and then get hunted down by a posse. But yeah, so there you see one of our metropolis. So that would be like a level 6 node when it's fully
Just
decked out,
yeah, full blown.
right? And
Uh,
of course, that can be sieged and razed to the ground. So a nearby city that maybe your guild uh, is has pledged to is our citizens of can go ahead and rise supreme and build your city up so that it's the dominant node.
and what
But
you were
yeah,
just
it's
saying,
vast. It's going to be a big world.
that's what stood out to me. What you were just describing was basically like I don't know if I want to PvP, right? Like it sounds like you. I can tell you're going to be ganking people. That one's easy based on the last hour's conversation. That one's clear. For me, it's like I've had off on experiences with PvP and MMOs, and I'm kind of like, meh. But I feel like, from what I've heard, there's opportunity to be a productive part of like, this group, I was about to say node. I don't know if that's a proper terminology, but basically,
But
and I could do something like be a shop owner, or I could be a part-time adventurer, or like participate in some ways, or I could see where escorting caravans or something like that may be a hell of a lot of fun.
that's
That's
right.
something I always wanted to do in Planetside, right? I was
Yeah, you
like,
could escort a caravan on the land, or you could do it on the sea if you want to be in a frigate. So there's opportunities for people to hire themselves out as mercenary bands to protect these things against NPCs, bandits, pirates, and then also against any player incursions. So there's a beautiful economy that's going to exist, but there's also this player driven element of it too that makes it fantastic. I mean, you can
and
imagine if you're into crafting, you could craft forever and just
yeah.
get into that.
So everybody, like, I always play these little weird characters, right? Like right now, I've been playing around with he's a gnome that's a rogue, but the chat can turn on permadeath for me. So if I die at any point, they turn it on, turn it off based off spending points in here, in the
Oh, that's
Twitch stream.
harsh.
And the
Harsh.
rest of these guys have been doing way harsher. I'm actually kind of cheating by having it turned off on occasion. But I've mainly just been making armor and shit. And so like I've got this character in my mind of like he's a smith. He's making stuff. He's basically a coward. But like in my mind, there's always I want that opportunity for something heroic or something weird. In this game, do you think I'm to really get shit done? I'm gonna have to just be a part of a guild, or could I feel like I matter in this world, like
Yeah,
just as an
absolutely.
individual?
Yeah, because you're pledging as a citizen to one of these nodes, and that's your home now. That's where all your services are. That's where these different non-player factions exist that you might join and gain benefits and level up in. So I feel like it's easily something that any solo person can get into, or anyone not in a guild. Uh, you have the ability to set up your own homestead and have your own crop resources or smithing set up. So I think there's a huge opportunity for anybody to get in, play the game, have a blast, and only take advantage of those systems or those elements that appeal to you. Some people will get in and just run across the world and just look at the graphics,
Mm.
and that's awesome. That's fine. They might never level past 10, but it doesn't. Whatever their experience they want to have, they can have.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's plenty there if you're just an explorer.
Right.
Um,
The
so
dungeons are crazy big. They're huge.
there's some footage of, I think, the early footage in this video where there's all the fire and the bear was running through. That was on the inside of a dungeon, wasn't it? It seemed like, if I remember the videos correctly, or I think they'll show more later. Um, so I guess the other thing, sort of bringing it back around to a lot of our earlier questions, was when we think of like how many of us have just been like fascinated by the Kunark stories that you're telling us, right? It's such a rich world. Like going into Kunark, it really feels like something that it makes absolute sense when you talk about the fact that this was your D&D campaigns, because it came from someone's imagination and love. Like I feel that with Kunark. With the way that the world's designed here in AOC, is it will that still exist? Like will these dungeons feel like these types of dungeons, or is there a little bit that's more of a, does it feel a little more procedural or programmatic, or
No, I think it's exactly like that because Steven comes at this as a game master, as a world creator, as somebody who has a specific history and vision written for all of this,
hmm.
and then working with his design team to implement it down to the to the micro level from the macro. And so for me, it feels very much like the Kunark approach, where he's taking all of these passionate, great story ideas from his gaming experiences and his imagination, and then bringing it to the design team. And then they're like, yes, let's do this and let's do these other cool things. So I feel all of these, the story is really awesome. I love the underlying story of it all, and I love how it will tie into all the POIs. So
Mm.
yeah, I feel like it's going to be very connected and compelling. It's very
No,
appealing to me because of that.
no, that sounds fantastic, and
You know,
and
we play pen and paper games, so we're always feeding off each other and looking at different cool elements that we encounter or create during our pen and paper sessions, and that's just more fuel for the fire for content.
I could have sworn that he mentioned that's how it got started. Like the relationship, was it you, or he mentioned playing, was it was it pen and paper or magic or something with some folks from Sony?
Yeah, he would go to into the game shop. That's where I met him. He would go into one of the local game shops, and he's a big Magic player, really good at Magic. Loves playing tactical games. He's big Warhammer fantasy player, and that's how I met him through a friend of mine who's a gamer who I worked with on EQ. And Steven was thinking about starting up an MMO company and making the next big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got introduced and we just rapped about it. And then later on, we started gaming together. So we're playing Pathfinder, and it's great. When we do a charity live stream once a year, and we usually he usually runs Pathfinder for a large part of it, 12 to 18 hours or something crazy. I don't know how he does
Oh,
it,
that's amazing.
but he's a fantastic game master. Really, really good.
No, that's again, that's great to hear. It feels like all the various pieces came together. Based on what you're describing. And again, I've been slowly catching up on things, but it feels like financially he had the capability to have enough independence to do something that, he could do without a lot of interference. And it sounds like he's got the background and the history with it as well. So combine that with the technical experience and the game design experience and all the rest of the experience that's coming in, especially being in that area. Um,
Yeah, there's so many MMO vets and Sony vets and talented people on the team. So uh, that that helps enormously. We don't have to recreate the same mistakes that we've made in the past, uh, or that new game devs make. So that
yeah,
really is wonderful. We're really fortunate. Like our design team's crazy good. So I'm looking forward to everything that they create.
awesome. So we I think because we started about 30 minutes early, we're coming up on the 2 hour mark, and like I definitely appreciate every bit of time that you're willing to give us. But I want to be considerate of your time as well. Um, so
You want to rip through some of these questions?
yeah, absolutely. That's what I was about to say. If we can get some more questions in, and if you got time to answer them, that'd be fantastic.
Why don't I start? Let me scroll up here and I'll come down.
And guys in
It
chat, if I
says
missed anything before, feel free to repost it.
Nick says, "How has it been working in Intrepid Studios? It's phenomenal because my because our leader Steven is phenomenal. So when you're working in an environment that's super collaborative and very flat and not pyramidal, and you can just go and collaborate with people at any time, just walk up to a designer and say, I have this really cool idea, and have them crush your soul by saying it's not really that great. That's awesome. But seriously, it's you can go and talk to anyone about anything, and it's just so collaborative, and everybody is so nice and so jovial and so passionate about their work. So that makes for a great studio and a great product. So so far it's been amazing. It's the best company I've worked at in my career for sure. Let's see what else. Why does it seem that cheats are not addressed? Things like show EQ and so forth. Well, show EQ is tricky, right? So they packet sniff, or max EQ or any of these programs. They packet sniff off. Usually they have another, uh, like maybe a Linux uh, machine that's looking at. So the way to fix cheats is to change your packets so you don't send information that players aren't supposed to have. But that usually requires a lot of work. So that might be one reason why that's not done. And when you're talking about a product that's like 20 years old, like is it really needed at this point?
Right.
If are these 4 people over here or 10 people? I mean, show EQ is more of a problem for PvP because you're aware of when enemy people come in your zone and you can react and go kill them, or when you enter a zone, you can see where they are and go kill them. So I think at this point in the modern era, what we try and do is only send things to the client that the client really needs to know. Because no matter what we do, somebody will disassemble that information and find out stuff. Let's see what else it says. Reputation community is quite different in recent
Cool.
MMOs due to instancing and is that immersion? Emerson losses. What's an Emerson loss?
Yeah, that was the one I was just on as well. I think uh, instancing immersion losses. Any thoughts to bring this back? So I think they're
Right.
working together there. The
So I think you have to have a blend of uh, content that is open world where people are interacting organically with each other. It's really weird when you say I have a massively multiplayer game and everyone only exists in an instance with their four best friends,
Right.
right? That's not, then you're playing a massively mini multiplayer game where you have a big world, but you only ever see people that you care about. So there's a balance in instanced uh, content versus open world content, and that balance has to be hit.
Yeah.
Are you designing actual creation PvP to have similar experience in EQ PvP? Well, depends what you mean about similar experiences. Um, EQ PvP was really poorly balanced and not well designed because the game wasn't made for that.
Right.
So from that standpoint, no. We're gonna, and also you could gank anyone in a level range. That's going to be different because we're using the flagging system in Ashes. Excuse me. Old men cough.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Um, any thought of the religious debate between new and old models in EQ? Is that the Lucklin versus non-Lucklin models?
Yeah, I've got the feeling it is.
I mean, the option exists for you to play either, right? So or show either, and I think even so, yeah, it shouldn't. I don't really have any thoughts on it. It's whatever people's preferences.
Cool. Yeah, I just realized I kind of feel guilty now as I'm showing this in the background. I'll make sure that because I forgot that I've been reposting these to YouTube, I'll make sure that it's super linked to the Lazy Peons site and to this video, etc. Like everything he does on MMOs is fantastic. So I've been plowing through
Yeah,
that lately as
really
well.
is.
So apologies for having it running in the background, Lazy Peon, without, but I've got the feeling this is also other footage that he's acquired, but I'll absolutely make sure that I get that link out to you guys here again and then also on the YouTube. Um,
So another
yes,
one was how is the stress at testing scale going?
right,
Very well. I mean, we have our last test was something like 16-kilometer uh, testing area, multiple dungeons, an underworld portion, thousands of NPCs in the dungeons and across the land, three of the city nodes, plus the portal starting area. So uh, we're getting very good performance, not just on the client but on our server processes.
cool.
And yes, there are techniques that have been learned from other games to uh, scale up. Uh, it's always going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge we welcome.
Camden just asked, are dungeons going to be a mix of open world and instanced or all instanced?
For sure, a mix. I think all of us, uh, the team on Ashes, really like the old school EQ style. This is a thing that exists for everybody in its current state. And I'm going to go in and Sean and I are going to go call the crypt, and we're going to camp that with our group, and everyone knows that's where we're at, and that's our thing. And when we're done, somebody else can take over that spot. And fighting your way to that, having to deal with the with interacting with other players, that's all really experiential stuff that we all loved about EverQuest. But at the same time, there's going to be content that has to be instanced
Right.
uh, for you, and this could be some special story quest or something that design determines they want to make a focused group experience or focused raid experience, and that's fine too. So it's about finding the balance that's meaningful.
Cool. Stephen, he's used the term a couple times.
Tell
I meant to
Stephen to
write
make
it down.
Planets North Side 3. That's funny. Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead.
he calls it social. So I've always just called it social friction, but he's got another. There's a term for that. But again, it's that same philosophy of there's something about those interactions, those subtle interactions in those open world zones or those non-instant zones that are so critical to creating like both a engaging world sense, but also those incidental interactions where you might get to know about somebody or get to actually know them or be aware of
Yeah,
them or
yeah. If we think about it, how many of us met people that became lifelong friends, or at least good
Absolutely.
friends, through playing these online games and interacting with them, sometimes even adversarial interactions, and having mutual respect and whatnot. How many of us had nemesis people that we hated, that we would log on just just not liking, and that too is another that's another great that's another source of great content. There's there's guilds in Planetside that I just detest, right? But that's what keeps me logging in, because I want to beat them. So there's something to that. If we just have a world that's very sterile and everyone's safe all the time and they just go into their own instance and play, then why are you playing an MMO? Play a co-op multiplayer ARPG or something. Why
Yeah. Well, it
why pay a sub?
it seems like then a lot of that sort of the some of the aggression thing just gets turned on your within that group that's been pieced together for not having enough DPS or some other shit. It's like
That
so
happens. Where
yeah,
you're going to get yelled at if you're a tank and you join a group and you fuck up the pull. I mean,
yeah,
that's life. There's no still I believe the cost of your little bruised ego or whatever in the short term, the long term benefits of interacting and meeting with people, getting better at whatever class or role you're playing, and establishing friendships and a social network. All of these for me personally outweigh uh, whatever minor mishaps that we experience on the journey, like getting screwed on a trade, or getting ganked while you're trying to kill this named mob and get this item that you've been trying to get for 2 days. That's going to happen, but that's
yeah,
part of the storytelling too. Who you want people around sharing this experience with you, so that you can tell these stories and reminisce on it. And if no one's there and you're just in some little instance by yourself, your story doesn't really matter. It's like, I did this great thing. Yeah, that's nice. No one was
yeah,
there.
yeah. Yeah, the massively single player experience is just not. I'd rather deal with the frustrations of actually being able to interact with other people.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. And with the flagging system, that's going to be fine. We're not going to have, if we have roving bands of PvPers, they're going to be cut down in short order. So it has to be, the combat and the contesting is going to be in a meaningful way.
the Nick, sorry I stepped on it before, Kevin. When you were following up, make Planetside 3. Tell Steven to make Planetside 3. Well, after this is a massive success, and you're looking at the next thing, I guess it, there's that tendency to go from fantasy to shooter. It's funny you described wanting to do that when you bounce over to Planetside. I felt the same way when I got sort of yanked off the EQ1 team to go to EQ2. I was like, can I go to Planetside instead, please? Yeah. So
All
who
right.
knows? Maybe that'll happen.
Yeah, I don't. Steven loves Gears of War. Like so when it comes to shooters, he really enjoyed that. He plays games of all styles. So I don't know where his passion will take him next. Uh, but whatever it is, it's going to be cool, because he's very he's very invested in the fun factor in these games, and
Mm.
I feel he's a very good designer and creative force. Um, and he's somebody I can go to and say, I don't like this, and here's my logical reasons why. And he will listen, and then he will agree with you, and then change it. So he's not making giant ego based decisions, which is fantastic.
Right on. No, that's great to hear. All right,
It is.
chat. Did we miss anything? Chat, are we good to go? Do you guys have some more questions? What was going on with
Oh yeah.
Swamp of No Hope?
Yeah, I would say that that's one of the areas where you have those, named mobs that don't have loot. So I feel like, yeah, that could have used more content love. I agree with you. We had a small team. We only have so many people making a billion zones with all these quests and
There's so much
outdoor pop.
content.
There's a lot of content, right? Design really really had to burn the midnight oil.
Frank says, "When are you coming back?" I think he's in a new world now. I think it sounds like it's going to be up to us to go visit him in a new place.
Yeah, for and again, you can
Oh,
there
to the
will be
stream.
somebody will make new EverQuests, right? Somebody will grab the reins on the IP and make new content, and they're still making new content, after 20 years. So I think you always have something to look forward to when it comes to EverQuest.
And Frank followed up and said, "I mean to the stream." I tell you what, like
And yes,
I'm
to Nick, there's a huge debate on that. Planetside 1 versus 2.
Planetside
What's
one
up, Greg?
versus two.
Yeah, I said, was there a huge debate on making Planetside 2 uh, too much or too little like Planetside 1? Yes, there was a big debate. Planetside 2 is markedly different than Planetside 1, and there were debates around that. My favorite EQ2 zone, uh, honestly, Crushbone, or no, uh, State of Unrest. Yeah, Unrest probably is my favorite, just because those those ghouls would root people, and I just watch them just get trained by the ghosts in the shit in the basement of the house and die, and I chuckle because I was there. It happened to me, happened to my wife, happened to everybody. That's a zone I remember a lot.
Yeah, Nick said both of those zones were great. Fader is a great continent. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
so
fun.
we've been playing through the TLP ever since Aerodune came up. Basically, that's what got me streaming EverQuest. Been
That's
streaming
awesome.
other stuff before and was like, all right, I'd come back. My girlfriend actually played EQ for the first time as part of this,
Is there
and
still a wait list on Aerodune,
no,
like a
the
queue?
queues have gotten better. Yeah, the queues have gotten
Good.
better. It was crazy those first couple of weeks. So plus I'm in Sweden, so it really didn't bother me very much because
You're
most
on
of you
off
guys
time
are
too.
asleep. And so, but it's felt so much like old EQ. And so Kunark is coming out mid-month, this month coming up,
Oh, no kidding.
August. And so I am so amped to go in and basically like just relive it because honestly, being on Aerodune for the last like what's it been, like 2 months now, has felt so much like that original experience. Not absolutely.
What's different about Aerodune than say other progression servers, if anything?
I hadn't played on any of the other progression servers, so I don't know. These guys that have been like on every one could tell you maybe nothing. I had trouble getting back in to EQ whenever I'd come back to my main because he's like level 65. The content had moved on. My guild had moved on. I'd come back. The starting cities would be a ghost town, and I'd just be
Right.
depressed and like kick a few rocks around and then log back out.
Yeah.
And coming back in and like seeing people in the newbie zones again and like having people around, like, when you're hanging out around Kelthan or whatever, makes all the difference to me. And so
Oh
like
yeah.
going into Kunark coming up, I'm so amped for it. Um, and so it,
Gold rush time, right?
dude, it's funny. I had goosebumps when you're just describing like Kunark when you first got on. You're talking about the sort of design process and where it came from in terms of it being a part of your life. And I'm like thinking ahead to like plowing into this shit coming up soon. And it's like it's a weird mix of the nostalgia for what it was like when I first rolled like an XR and ran around there and just had my mind blown. And
Right.
then rolled in and had my mind blown in a different way when I was going in with my main and going into different zones. So it's like that mix of like those feelings again, but knowing it's also coming up again and then getting to talk to you is like so badass. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's Sunday morning and you're making a massive, incredible MMO, so I'm sure you don't have a shitload of free time. Um, if I tell you what, if you think of anything that you didn't get a chance to discuss today, or if just whatever, if you had a good time, if you like our community and like would want to come back at some point, we'd definitely love to have you back on the stream. And it's oh, Ryan just so Ryan Barker from the EQ team just popped in just now.
Nice. Hey Ryan.
Yeah, so we've got some of the other EQ folks, etc., like in here, and it's turned out to
Ryan
be
rocks.
such a good
I like
time.
Ryan a lot.
He's a
We
decent
got
guy.
to
He's okay.
he's way decent. We got to work together on EQ1 when I was on the expansion content after Planetside 2. That was dope. And then we got to work together on Ashes, which was also awesome.
Yeah. No, I love Ryan. And I think when you ask what's been different as well, like, so coming back and streaming and like having essentially a guild like sort of materialize, I didn't expect that. Like I was expecting maybe two or three people would watch the stream, and if I'm lucky, I could track down somebody like Ryan and some of the old crew. And
Yeah,
like just having people in here while I'm playing, like talking and sharing stories about what's about to happen with the future expansions and just all the nostalgia and shit. Like essentially that sense of community is
yeah,
always
it's
so
pretty
huge, part of EQ and like part of MMOs that seems missing more and more these days. And so I
I
think
agree.
for me that's also been a big deal.
It is a huge deal. I think these, you know, like EverQuest, older games uh, are showing us that community is important, social interaction is important, and that's what makes it so fun and all these stories so compelling. You know, years later. So, how about a chat? What's different about the Aerodune progression server, or is it the same?
Yeah, has it been the same for you guys? Longer queues?
They don't know.
They don't know.
I'm gonna have to maybe jump in there and make a character, and
Same old, Bobby says.
then I could.
Do,
Oh yeah, sweet.
so yeah, you making a character would be awesome, especially for Kunark.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, we
So
have there's people at work at Intrepid that play EQ 1999.
Bobby just asked, and I'm not going to repeat that out loud, Bobby. I'll let him answer that if he said it, but let's see. Um, Brian said I haven't played TLP in like 10 years, so it's hard to judge. Um, yeah, no, just it's been amazing just running around and inviting random people and turning them into friends. Yeah, I've again, it feels like the same thing. I've met a lot of rad people in game. A lot of people just through the stream though. So yeah.
Are they all? Would you say that the community that you're experiencing on the server is older? Like
I would.
you're not getting a ton of young people, yeah.
So it's interesting because the community on the server, I think, skews a bit older. As I'm uploading these videos to YouTube, I can start to get some demographic data.
Okay.
Um, and it's as you would think. Well, actually, a bit younger than maybe you're thinking. But I think that's also skewed by the people that are interested in AOC as well. After Akil's, when I put Akil's video up, naturally that brought some eyes on from AOC. But there's this sort of core group of people that seem to be in their like mid 30s. Um,
Wow, that's impressive.
yeah, so 25 to 35-year-old is kind of what I'm seeing numbers wise, within the second biggest segment being, 35 plus.
Right.
So a few of us there. And then right behind that, not crazy below it, is the younger segment coming in. So
Wow.
off by a few percentage points. I'm noticing that a lot of people that come and chat will sort of describe getting into EQ when they're real young. Like, hey, I was 6 and my dad let me, like push buttons. Or a lot of people are coming in saying they're like 10 or 11.
Right. No,
And
I've had
so,
that too, where a guy I met, um, I don't know what game we're playing, D&D or something, or Warhammer, and he basically was 9 or 10 or 11 and was playing with his parents. It was a family thing they did. They played EverQuest together, and so he found out I knew Brad McQuaid, and he lost his shit. He was like, "Oh my god!" And I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to go meet with Brad. We're going out for Chinese food. You want to go?" And he's like, "Oh my god!" So we went and got Chinese food with Brad. It was fun.
it's got to be the coolest experience. Yeah, we got a number of people now in chat saying start at 12, start at
Yeah.
10, Frank. Inkley, you're 31. All right. So that, again, when we track back, that's like that 10, 11 range. I can't imagine how rad it must have been to be a kid and be like 10, 11, 12 and have EverQuest in my hands.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, yep. A lot of folks in chat sort of repeating that same thing.
I think I was 30, around 30 when it launched.
I think I was like 24, 25.
Put way too many hours into that game. Holy crap. Think of all the foreign languages and things we could have learned instead of playing EverQuest.
Had I
Uh,
not had I not played EverQuest, I would not be sitting in a foreign country today, though, probably.
that's probably true. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing either. So
Yeah. So it's time well spent.
it is.
All right, Kevin.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. You're awesome, awesome host. Thank
I
you, Chad.
appreciate it.
Great questions. And you are all very awesome as well.
Yeah, and I know 1,000% as soon as we get off here, there are going to be a million questions that we wish we'd asked you about Kunark and other stuff along the way. So I'll follow
Sure.
up with you and just kind of see how it goes. But dude, I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
Um,
it's my pleasure.
and we didn't get a chance to meet. Like I think I came in 2000. By then you were gone, and then I was in Austin, Texas when you came back,
All
and
right.
so I missed you both ways. So I'm really amped to be able to meet you in this way, and yeah, man, thanks a ton.
Well, thanks. Well, it's all you. You reached out to me, and I really appreciate that. But those were great heady times. Loved working on the design and just on Kunark in general. I love playing it. So much fun.
Right on. It is for many of us, it's our favorite expansion.
Right on. That's cool.
Exactly.
Boom. He's watching over me. He's like my statue protection +1. All right. Well, thank you, Chad. I'm going to bail, and then I'll try and answer follow up questions. Sean, thank you so much for hosting. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's totally my pleasure. Not bullshitting on that. And yeah, feel free to whenever you want, like pop onto the stream as well. Pop in the chat. I'll hit you up in Discord, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Um, cool, dude.
Cool.
All right,
Later, Ryan Barker.
and I always screw up the pushing the button part of it. Bye bye.